To our Industry Insights Consulting panel. My name is Kaylin Wood, and I'm a student intern on the Employer Engagement team at the USC Career Center. I would also like to introduce a fellow student intern, Valerie, who will be helping with the Q&A portion of this event. Before we begin, I would like to let everyone know that this event is being recorded. So this event is designed to give students the opportunity to explore different career options and gain some industry insights from our amazing panelists. We want this panel to be as interactive as possible. So when we do open the panel for audience questions, please indicate that you have a question by using the raise hand function on Zoom. And if you do have a question, please be prepared to unmute your microphone when prompted so that you can ask your question. With that being said, I would now like to introduce our amazing panelists. We have panelists from Deloitte, EY Parthenon, Simon Kucher, and Mercer. So one of the first questions I would like to ask our panelists is to just please introduce yourself and tell us about your organization, including what sector of consulting you represent and what that means. So if we want to start with Danny, that would be great.
Yes. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Danny. I'm based out of the LA office for Deloitte. I've been with Deloitte for roughly about 4.5 years now. I'm a consultant. Sector-wise, the practice that I'm a part of is called the cross-industry payments practice. So it's industry agnostic. So it could just I've been on consulting projects for various industries. So I'm not focused on just one kind of industry. And payments focus, so it could be from the whole life cycle of payments. I mean, I think most consumers, will know about credit cards, POS systems that you see like at the market, and all the way across to the payment processors, and so on. I could keep on going forever, so don't let me bore you with all those details. But yes, that is the practice that I'm a part of and not specific to one industry.
Perfect. Thank you so much. If we can move on to Miguel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miguel. I am a career consulting senior analyst at Mercer, also based out of Los Angeles. The industry that I pertain to is specifically human capital, which essentially just implies that we primarily focus on the employee side for the clients that we work with. We offer a wide variety of different professional services at Mercer. So it could be working on executive compensation, job architecture, doing like a benchmarking analysis to understand what an organization is currently paying relative to market. And that's something that I've really appreciated working at Mercer, just the wide variety of things that we're able to offer. But we primarily focus in the human capital industry. Alternatively, I would assume that other consulting firms are more strategy based or in different sectors, but we primarily focus in human capital.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Let's move on to Jason.
My name is Jason Huddleston. I'm out of the LA office for EY Parthenon. I've been at the firm for about 4 years now, and I'm a senior consultant. So EY Parthenon, it's slightly different than our EY consulting counterparts. We sit under the strategy and transaction branch. So a lot of the work we do revolves around merger and acquisition. So we do kind of the whole life cycle of the deal. We have strategy teams, we have private equity teams. I'm part of the deal management team, so that's a lot more the program management, the whole kind of process. We also have working capital, human capital, a lot of different pieces that kind of flow into the deal, but primarily it's deal focused. So it's pre-deal, post-deal, during deal, but that is kind of our main focus. So if you're interested in M&A, that's where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. And Truman.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Truman Fritz. I'm actually a USA alumnus, so fight on. I'm a senior consultant here at Simon Kucher. You probably haven't heard of us. Maybe you've heard of Deloitte and EY Parthenon, but we're a boutique consulting firm. We're actually 2,000 people across 42 offices worldwide. We got about 6 or 7 offices in the United States. I'm out of our New York office, so it's a little bit late here for me. So that's why there's no sunshine. But we're a growth consulting firm, so we focus on making businesses more money through strategy, marketing, pricing, sales, a bunch of top line functions. So we don't do any cost cutting. Because we're focused on a specific kind of function, we don't align ourselves to any specific industry. We're a generalist consulting firm, and so while here you work across software, internet, and media, you work across B2B industrials. I was actually at an oil refinery site earlier today for my current client, which is a industrial scaffolding firm. We do a bunch of different things. You can kind of chart your own path because we're a relatively small but still mighty firm. I've been here about 2 years.
Perfect, thank you. We also have Savannah here from PwC. So if you could also introduce yourself and let us know what sector of consulting you work in.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, of course. I'm Savannah. I work at PwC with our management consulting practice, and we are not aligned by industry verticals. We previously were. So I was previously in tech, media, telecom, TMT, but then moved into a group called customer transformation. So we focus on all different types of customer experience strategy, marketing, sales, service, those types of engagements, with both the strategy side as well as more of the implementation side.
Okay, thank you all for sharing. I guess the next question would be, obviously consulting consists of a lot of different aspects, but what would you say are some of the challenges and or benefits for working in your industry? I guess we'll start with Danny again.
Of course, being broadly speaking, challenges is it's project based. So that brings on various challenges. First of all, you won't always have the same client, and the client could have many different personalities and characters that you will have to build a relationship with. And, some may be very friendly and some may not be. And you will have to learn how to navigate. And because you're under contract and you want to be successful in your project, and a lot of times, let's say your scope of work gets expanded. I know that happens a lot in consulting, and you will just have to learn how to deal with that. Benefits, I would say, consulting overall, I kind of see it as like a Swiss Army knife, depending on, if you just come out of college, unless they push you into a certain practice or a group that's very specific, you have an opportunity to learn so many different things in a relatively short amount of time. So, some people say that, a year in consulting, could be equivalent to, multiple years in the industry. So non-consulting, non-client facing. So you have a lot of opportunity for growth. I know, at least from my experience, right when I joined Deloitte, I ended up I had to leave the project like immediately. And so you do have that opportunity. You will be given a lot of responsibilities pretty early. So if you want that, and then you want to learn many different things, I think that's the benefit. So even, some people kind of see consulting as like, it's great for exit opportunities, and it's because of that. My 2 cents.
Thank you. Jason, do you want to answer this question?
Of course.
Thank
So, I mean, yeah, I don't want to just echo everything Danny said. He hit it on the head with pretty much every point. But some of the challenges, and this is something I think a lot of you guys have heard when you guys talk about consulting, is sometimes work-life balance can be a little bit of an obstacle. Reason for that, as Danny was mentioning, your scope of work changes. So when you're working an industry job, you probably know this is what I do Mondays, this is what I do Tuesdays, I have my sales report, I have my job, and you can kind of manage your work and your time around that. Whereas in consulting, I know overall what the scope of my project's going to be. I know what needs to happen at the end, but you don't really know what the day-to-day challenges are going to be. And if something comes up that might require you to work a longer workday to get it done, sometimes there are going to be those pushes if there's not enough time that's kind of baked in. So that really just life that kind of ebbs and flows. Sometimes you're going to be working long hours, and that's what people talk about with consulting. Other times there's the flip side of you might have kind of misjudged on the other side of you're only working a shorter than 8 hour day. And that happens sometimes because then you're waiting on another team for something, or you just kind of find you have a little more time, you're able to do something quicker than you originally thought. So it lets you live a little more of an exciting life, just because of that ebb and flow. Another thing to that, one of the benefits.
I think he may have frozen.
Yes. Okay. Well, hopefully he's able to rejoin. But for now, Savannah, do you want to answer the question?
Sure. Yeah, I think obviously would echo what others have said. I think it's pretty consistent across the industry. One thing that I would add in terms of challenges is I think coming from college, which I think both of the others kind of mentioned a little bit previously, but coming from college, I think into consulting, there's a lot of ambiguity, meaning when you get assigned a new project or a new team, or you get a new ask from your manager, director, partner, senior associate, if you're an incoming associate or intern, then there is a level of ambiguity that you probably aren't used to. And I think a lot of people struggle with that coming into consulting compared to other industries, because you really are given a great level of autonomy around your tasks, like Danny mentioned, but it does require comfortability in working with that level of ambiguity. So when you're given a new task, you may not know what you're doing. I would say, honestly, a majority of the time, you probably don't know what you're doing at first, and that's okay. Just kind of getting comfortable with that level of ambiguity and knowing that that really is a huge part of being a consultant is being comfortable with that, being very active in problem solving around the task, and then kind of using it to your advantage and figuring out where your strengths are, how you can kind of use that ambiguity to solve the problem and make sure that you kind of build your skill set. And then in terms of what is really appealing about the industry, I think to add to others would be the level of executive exposure that you get to our clients. I know it's true at PwC. I'm assuming it's true of other firms, but as soon as you're an intern at PwC, you're really thrown into an associate role. So we expect you to kind of take on the full-time role of an associate, which is the entry-level full-time position. And you are given that level of task. So I think that that's a really cool opportunity as someone who's an undergrad, is to be able to kind of take that responsibility and learn so much from it. And then also, kind of like Danny mentioned, working across industries, getting exposure to C-suite level clients is really awesome and not something that you'd often get in an entry-level position outside of consulting.
Perfect. Thank you. I wanted to give Jason an opportunity to finish what he was saying before it got cut off. So
Sorry about that, guys. Am I still frozen? Okay, cool. All right, if I freeze again, just move on. But yeah, high level, one of the challenges, like I was saying, there is just some work-life balance obstacles, and you're going to face them, and that's okay. It's easy to work past them a lot of the times. And like I was saying, I don't know if I got cut off before this, but it does ebb and flow. So pretty much there are going to be times when you're not on a project at all, and you're still working. You can help with internal initiatives, but your life's going to be a lot easier. So overall, that's one of the benefits, and one of the problems is your work-life balance is just going to ebb and flow, and you get to kind of plan accordingly. But overall, it makes life a lot more fun.
thank you. Truman, did you want to answer the question?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think everyone's kind of hit on the major points. You know, work-life balance is kind of malleable. You never know what's going to happen every other day. I think I want to really delve deeper on Danny's point to exit opportunities and kind of what you're learning and what you're doing as a consultant. You are trying to solve the problems that businesses wrestle with at the highest levels of their organization as somebody who is 24, 25, 26. And you're not going to know the answers to that. That's why there are engagement managers and partners and senior partners and subject matter experts. But trying to wrestle with those questions and really understand them from a day-to-day perspective, and say, hey, we're trying to size this market. How do you actually do that? We're trying to improve the operations for a specific business unit. What do you need to analyze? What data do you need to get to do that? And learning those kinds of tactics and those kinds of game plans sets you up for a career in basically anywhere that you want to work. And so I refer to it a lot as like kind of a practical MBA, where if you go and get your MBA, that's great, that's fantastic, and a lot of firms will require you to do that. But that's very academic, right? This is very, very tactical. This is very, very pragmatic, practical. And it's across all these different industries with real world consequences, for better, for worse, right? And so if you're somebody who wants to kind of keep as many doors open as long as possible and wants plentiful career opportunities, wants to kind of move out, because plenty of people move out of consulting after 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, however many years. And you want to find out, where you want to move and try a bunch of different industries and a bunch of different functions, then it sounds like this would kind of be the industry that you would probably be interested in.
Thank you. And we also, Miguel, want to answer?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely starting off with one of the challenges, I think, and just to give some additional context as well. So I also went to USC, but during my time in college, I was specifically trying to pursue a career in medicine. So from freshman to senior year, I was dedicated to taking pre-med courses, didn't really do any internships within, I guess you could say, corporate America. And then when I pivoted towards consulting, I definitely say one of the challenges were the pace of learning for a specifically oriented industry. So at Mercer, as I mentioned earlier, we're primarily focused on human capital, which is, I would say, more human resources oriented. And obviously in college, I didn't necessarily major in that. I didn't really look for opportunities to kind of immerse myself more in human resources. So I think the extensiveness of how in-depth my training was the first couple months at my company was definitely pretty challenging. But at the same time, I think that at Mercer, they definitely did everything they could to prepare me and give me the opportunities to kind of build up that knowledge and that foundation to be able to essentially use some of the work that we do on our different projects. But also the other benefits, I think a lot of people already hit them on the nail, but I would definitely say, like, at least at Mercer, we have a unique model where we're staffed on 6 different projects at a time. I know in certain situations, certain companies typically are staffed in one project for a X amount of time. But I guess that benefit allows me to have the opportunity to work with others that I don't typically work with. At the same time, continue to develop those like soft skills, and as others have said as well, just allows me to basically explore other opportunities, having those foundations of being able to kind of develop those like foundational skills. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for answering that. We want to also give our attendees an opportunity to ask questions. So as I explained earlier, please use the raise hand function on Zoom. And if you are asking a question, please be prepared to unmute your microphone when prompted so that you can ask the question. I'm going to hand it over to my co-moderator, Valerie, for the Q&A portion of the event. So thank you all so much.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and I will call on people to unmute themselves and ask their question. Okay, perfect. Eric?
Hi, so thank you so much for being here. One question that I had is, what advice would you give to someone who wants to go into like biotech consulting or like healthcare consulting? So what kind of advice or like background would you recommend that they have?
Eric?
Yes.
Oh, you heard me. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Let
It's
me
the
tell my
biotech question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so do we just answer or do we get called on?
This is just like a general question for anyone who has like the answer or who would want to pitch it.
I can answer that. I would say two things. One, I would say don't initially limit yourself. There's a lot of industries out there and there's a lot of work. And for myself, I think I care more about the work I do than the industry it's for. And a lot of times with consulting, the projects you're on, I think change how your day-to-day works a little more than who you're doing them for. But if you are, hey, I want to do biotech, I'm focused on that, that's totally okay as well. Then with that, I would say look for a firm that has they're set up by sector. Each firm, we're kind of set up sometimes horizontally, sometimes vertically, whether it's by sector, whether by project types. Find a firm that is a little more focused on that. And I'm sure there's also boutique firms that do kind of focus specifically on biotech. But if that is something you're interested in, I can only speak for EY Parthenon, but I'm sure all my colleagues here would say the same, is that we do encourage you to kind of follow your passions. And so that is something you can definitely say when you enter the firm. And when you're talking to your engagement manager, maybe your first project might not be biotech, but as long as you keep networking and you keep finding the right people at the firm that maybe are the leads of biotech or someone that has worked in a lot of biotech projects in the past, everyone wants you to succeed and wants you to follow your passion. So, and I'm sure that applies to all the other firms here too. So I would just say be vocal about it and there shouldn't be a problem.
Thank you.
And just to add to his point, he's totally right. So especially the larger consulting firms, there's a high chance that you might not get exactly what you want from the gate, right? They expect you to be a generalist in the beginning because you don't come with a ton of experience. But I think it will be helpful. I think it will be pretty obvious if you've done internships in biotechnology or healthcare. The functional knowledge goes a long way. Let's say if you're not a big coder or you're not so wise on technology as a skill set, but you do understand the industry pretty well, that goes a long way. Also, he just mentioned it, but the networking never stops, especially in consulting. You have to be vocal. You can't just expect somebody to just hand you biotech consulting projects, but you will have to continue to network. And I think, I know that you've heard this all the time, especially as students, you have to network. But within the firm, I think it will be easier. You'll probably get a better response rate. So just make sure that you're plugged into the right communities. At least at Deloitte, I know by different sectors, industries, there's so many communities of practitioners that are specified to something. And when you find that, you want to be connected, at least, being engaged in certain initiatives that's outside of client projects. And I would say that's one great way to find a path to what you really want out of consulting.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off of Danny's idea here. Like, I know that networking is a word that's thrown around a lot, especially I went to USC Marshall, so there was always some kind of fair going on, and always people were trying to get to 500 plus on LinkedIn, and there was a whole mindset around networking. And I honestly think that when you get into the real professional world, networking becomes a lot easier and a lot less forced, where you're going to find people in a new city or in a new work environment who have gone to the same school, or maybe they have a mutual friend with you, or maybe you guys follow each other, follow the same account on Instagram or Twitter or something like that. And it's when you think about networking, just think about finding people who've got similar interests and similar values to you, and find those communities and those kinds of opportunities that exist to talk with those people. And whether that's, at Simon Kucher, like, we have a separate life sciences division. So sometimes firms will be a larger firm and they'll have specific jobs for people in those divisions. I know that we definitely do. And I think there's plenty of boutiques out there that do as well. And so there's individual communities in the places that you can work where maybe it's formalized like we have it here, or maybe it's, to Danny's point, maybe it's some kind of like internal subject matter expertise group, kind of knowledge sharing, coffee chat that happens twice a week. But finding those opportunities to plug in and talk with those people is definitely a big thing. And I think that to bring this back to the original question, when you're trying to figure out how to work in this industry and where you want to slot in, I mean, talking to people is the best thing that you can do, especially people who are 2 to 3 years into consulting. They have a good handle on what the day-to-day looks like. They have a good handle on how to get in and what people are looking for. And they'll probably be the ones who are interviewing you as well, at least in those initial rounds where you really need to make an impression. But yeah. And I think I really want to echo somebody else's earlier point, like, don't limit yourself to certain firms. Always look at certain firms. I didn't know about Simon Kucher until I heard about it through some random USC connection. And now I work here and I love it. So there you go.
All right, thank you very much. Brittany?
Hi, I was wondering, how do you think AI is going to impact the consulting world?
Happy to start. I would say it already has. I know that PwC has made a huge investment in AI recently, and that doesn't just mean helping develop additional AI, it also means figuring out how companies can effectively use it, the legal ramifications, and how different industries can best utilize it in their projects, in their strategy, in day-to-day operations. So I would say it won't only impact how we do our work and improve our efficiency internally, but it will also impact how we deliver to clients and how clients are operating. So I would say it already has. It's not extremely new to us. I know it has a lot more buzz recently, but I would say I'm assuming other firms have as well, but we've already kind of been jumping into AI for a while now. And it's pretty exciting to see kind of the investments that at least PwC has made and to see how we can kind of be on the cutting edge of some of those developments.
This is a tough question for me to answer, but yes, at Deloitte, I've seen a lot of investment into AI. I mean, we have our own AI practice, but from my observations so far, I think executives at big corporations, they're just asking, like, what are we supposed to do with AI? And they want consulting firms to give a perspective. And also, they're trying to, I mean, if you're thinking about big companies and enterprises, they're still trying to catch up on technology from like 10 years ago. It's just harder to implement new technology when you're so big. And so I see it, I mean, I think maybe more menial tasks are more easily, like if, for example, like ChatGPT, these kind of things that could, take away some of the mundane tasks. But as far as like how will it impact certain departments, I think, yeah, I mean, to be quite frank, I think a lot of executives are thinking from a cost-cutting perspective as well, right? If, how is it going to impact our organization as far as do we need this group if we implement this specific AI technology for our firm? So that is what I think I mean, that's on the minds of a lot of people. I know there are many other, like it could enable a lot of organizations in the right way without maybe cutting some folks, and then, it empowers their employees. But at the same time, the elephant in the room, it really is, yeah, how many people do I need once I implement AI for my organization?
All right, thank you very much. I don't know if any other panelists would like to add something. All right, if not, we can move on. Oscar?
Yeah, thank you. I have a question that, as you guys mentioned, that a lot of the clients that you are working with are C-level clients. with decades of years of experience in this specific industry. So how do you master the knowledge in a very specialized industry in a very short amount of time in order to match the knowledge that your clients have?
I can start on this one. So yes, they have more knowledge in probably what they specifically do, but I think we're all specialized in our own ways. So with us, I mean, we are specialized on like different types of projects, right? So for myself, like we've been doing with deal management, so we do a lot of merger and acquisition. So I'm already on like my 5th deal right now in the past, I'd say like year and a half. And as a great example of like talking to C-suite people, we just had a workshop, and in that workshop, there was like a little lunch break. I bumped into the new CEO of the spinoff company. And then he asked me like exactly kind of how you see in like case studies. Like he's like, hey, how do you feel about like the IT costs? Are they a little bit high? Now, granted, he has, let's say 30, 40 years of experience leading his team, but this might only be the second like spinoff he's done while he's spent that 30 years at this company. Whereas I've had 5 or 6 different transactions that I've been part of. So although he does have more years of experience in what he does, I probably do actually have more experience in merger and acquisitions than he does. So when it comes to stuff like that, you just got to use, you are actually dealing with this a lot more, and you are exposed to a lot more resources, a lot more benchmarking, and a lot more of internal knowledge that he probably doesn't have. So there is actually a way that it's not faking it. You actually do have the answers that they're looking for. So I think just leveraging that, leveraging all the work, because it's not only just a few years of experience you have, you also have the knowledge that you're piggybacking from your entire team and from the entire company. So all the firms here are fairly large firms. There's going to be a repository of knowledge that, let's say, that C-suite person does not have access to, like a combined like 100 years of consulting experience. So there's just a lot of information for you to leverage.
Also, I think if you're dealing with executives, I mean, I have not led a project where I had to be the face to an executive, but I was just part of the team, or somebody that's pretty high up, maybe 1 or 2 levels down the executive suite. But people that are, I mean, from my observation, are close or are at the executive level, they're not looking for all the details, right? They want the important stuff, but in a summarized version, right? So you just want to be prepared. And also, if you're an analyst, they're not going to expect you to know all the answers and have all the experience and the knowledge, but they will understand that you're an analyst on a project team, and they might ask you a question because as an analyst, you're going to be doing the legwork, and they might have a question on specific data. For example, if you're doing some kind of market intelligence report, and they're, they have a specific question for a specific region, you might be called upon. So, they will understand what your position is, but just be good with what you're doing, your data, and just be ready to be called upon. And for executives, they do like it short and sweet a lot of times.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think a lot of it is knowing your audience, like Danny said, and recognizing that different communications are more appropriate for different stakeholders. And then the other part of it is, like he said, you'll be coming in as an intern or an associate, and we're not expecting you to know everything, right? We're expecting you to come with a drive and a desire to learn and do the research and do the legwork and just be open to trying new things. So no one expects you to have all the answers. I wouldn't stress out too much about that, but it's always great to see new interns or associates who really take initiative, do the research, and come with a fresh perspective.
Yeah, I really want to expand on that point. Like, sometimes when you get into a new client, sometimes you're the expert and the clients trust that. That's been the extent of my experience. But sometimes they are skeptical of someone in their 20s telling them that they know how to run their business better than they do when they're 55, 60, and they've been in, they've been running, they've been running Dave & Buster's for like 40 years, something like that, right? So, I think the biggest thing that is the shift in how we think about consulting when you go from undergrad to actually working in the industry is realizing that you're part of the team, and there's a reason that the team is set up the way that it is. There's a reason that you are a an associate who reports to a consultant, who reports to a manager, who reports to a senior manager, who reports to a partner, who reports to a senior partner, and there's all of these layers to it. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not talking with anybody else above those layers. In fact, it's usually actually the opposite, where you're all working together. And so when you get into consulting, you got to trust in the process. You got to work with your team, and you got to be flexible and coachable and realize that you're not going to have all the answers, but you're going to sure as hell try to give your perspective, as Savannah mentioned. And just for your all sake, for your own edification, the primary stakeholder on the client side often will not be the C-suite. In our line of work, our project manager who's going to be working with us, having daily, weekly meetings, is going to be more like the VP of sales. But you will have your fair share of times in the boardrooms. You will be talking to C-suite people. They will be part of the kind of steering committee that comes in once a month, twice a month, and approves on the overall findings of the project. I can't say the same thing if you're more of an implementation focused firm, but at least for strategy consulting, that's the way that we're set up.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to read out a comment from the chat box. Someone asked if each of you could go around and talk about what your role was on your first projects in the first year that you started at your consulting firm.
I can start with this one because it was a really wild case. We were basically hired to run revenue management, so pricing, sales, marketing, all that stuff, in real time for an amusement park, specifically a company that owned like hundreds of amusement parks globally, and we were part of the US division managing that. So it was very different. It wasn't strategy focused, it was more implementation focused than 90% of the work that I've done here so far. But it was a useful project in the sense that I got to know the protocols and the kind of tactics for consulting very, very quickly, where you have you have your weekly core team meetings where you meet with just like the primary stakeholders on the client side. You have a bi-weekly kind of executive level meeting with a broader audience, and you have a monthly steerco, which is going over the larger pieces. And so there was a lot more structure around what we were kind of doing. But then, in following cases where I was working on a fake meat ingredient company, then a commercial kitchen equipment company, then a auto parts distribution company, then we consulted for another consulting firm. Like, all of that stuff was a lot more strategic and a lot more high level. But when we came in and did that kind of implementation work first, I got to know the kind of the cadence of which you have meetings and how you communicate to clients and how you act on analysis really, really quickly, figure out how you get from data to hypothesis to recommendation. And I think I'd like to think that a lot of firms take that approach when they're considering new consultants.
Yeah, I can add on to that. So I think in terms of my first role in the first year I was there, I'd say it varied honestly a lot, depending on the project that I was on. But that being said, I think getting more tactical, I think Truman, you made a good point around the different interesting clients, the different types of work you might do. I think a lot of times, at least when I was an undergrad, I really wanted to know what my day-to-day would look like. And I always anticipate answering that question because I get asked that maybe 1,000 times during recruiting season. But I think it really does vary. And I know that's a very frustrating answer for someone who hasn't experienced it. But I think when you first go on to your first projects, either as an intern or as a full-time associate, your day-to-day will likely involve attending meetings with the client, attending internal meetings with your own firm team. So I have meetings with my PwC team. I have meetings with my client where we do status updates. I would be taking notes. I would be helping create deliverables. So whether that's PowerPoint decks or Excel files or models, you'll be working on those pretty hands-on and kind of get into the weeds of those. Sometimes you'll be presenting, which is always fun and something that you can kind of practice. And I think kind of going back to previous questions, kind of flex your communication style based on the stakeholder. But those are some examples, I think, if people are curious about what actual tasks might look like in your first year. I think the projects will be so variable. I worked on strategy projects. I worked on more tactical, kind of tech-focused projects where I was basically a scrum master. We really run the gamut. So it depends, I'll say. And then I saw kind of the follow-up question in the chat around how you get staffed on a project and how it works, if you have to use your network or not. And I think it does vary by firm, but I can speak for PwC in that we really have two key methods of getting staffed on a project, one of which is formal, which is really the normal natural way to get staffed. So you have a deployment manager whose job is to make sure that everyone is staffed on projects, and you get to kind of explain your interests, your background, your travel preferences, things like that, and they will staff you. The other way is more informal, and that's really through networking. So like we mentioned before, networking remains an extremely important part of your career after you leave college. And that is another great way to get staffed on a project. If you don't love what you're getting placed on automatically at PwC, it's kind of nice. You get to kind of network onto projects. If you have certain team members who you really love working with, you can always reach out to them and they can pull you onto projects. So you never have to feel fully stuck.
I can also answer this one. So as far as kind of the day-to-day, when you first get started, as they both mentioned, I mean, it's going to vary a lot. So I won't go into kind of like what my first projects were. But as far as the skills you need, which I think is kind of where this question is leading to, is like depending on the project, depending on how kind of numbers based it is or how qualitative or quantitative, you do need to be decent at Excel at least. You know, depending on where you're working, you don't really need to know macros and all that, but you will be in Excel, you will be in PowerPoint. And as they mentioned, you will be taking notes in meetings. Taking notes in meetings is a little harder than it sounds. You have a lot of people talking about things that you've probably never heard in your business classes. They're using acronyms that you don't know what they mean. And you can't always just unmute yourself and be like, hey, what does that mean? What does SAP stand for? What is OTC? What is A to P? There's a lot of different things that you just kind of have to take notes, use context clues, move with it. And people are talking very fast. People are not talking at the speed you're typing. So you have to try to comprehend it, turn it into notes. And then your manager might be like, hey, okay, can you send out those notes to everyone? And you have to make sure that they make sense. Same with Excel and PowerPoint. You're going to be like putting together tables and just basic stuff, making sure that whatever's on there makes sense. Although that might be how you heard it, you then have to kind of take another pass and just say, does this make sense? Is this something I'm going to send out with my name on it? Even if you're sending it out internally to your own team, you want to make sure that that's like a high value deliverable there. So if the question is to kind of what you guys should be focusing on, I would say focus on that. Make sure you guys are understanding, you guys are probably using PowerPoint in some of your presentations in class. You guys might have an Excel class here or there, or using Excel in some of your courses. Try to become familiar with those, because those are going to be your tools, and that's going to help you stand out at day one. As we've all mentioned, no one's expecting you to know anything about kind of the industry you're working for or what the solutions are going to be. But there is an expectation that you can then take notes and you can operate a model, use Excel and use PowerPoint as you're instructed. So you're not asking like, hey, how do I do a VLOOKUP or basic things like that. And then as far as staffing, almost exactly what Savannah said. The one thing I will add to that is I think everyone has their own preference. As you move forward in your career, you're probably going to move away from the formal staffing model. And you don't want to be like in your 5th year and you're just waiting for a project to land on your desk. You should already know kind of what's coming next. And as you're as your career progresses, you will then start being able to understand, hey, my project's ending in 2 weeks. We're not going to get extended. Then already start networking there so that you have a pretty clean switch off to transition to the next project. And also when you're networking for projects, that also helps you figure out exactly what you want to do. So I forgot who was talking about biotech earlier, but the networking route really helps you kind of focus on getting onto those types of projects. Or in my case, I like working with certain managers. And so I'll try to network with those managers and figure out when a project with theirs is coming up. So it gives you a lot more control if you find your own projects, but there is a way that the firm will help you find projects too, if that doesn't work. Thank you.
I want to add on to Jason's point. I don't think I've ever been on a project where it doesn't involve PowerPoint, Excel, and note taking. So I think a lot of people might think, oh yeah, PowerPoint, I could probably just swing out on to practice it. There are differences between different PowerPoint decks, let me tell you, right? So people do care about the visual appeal, the alignment, the content that's going in, and understanding, your audience. It's an executive audience, so you might want to kind of make it more concise and to the point. Note taking, I need to emphasize this. Note taking, why is it important? First of all, for yourself, right? You don't know everything and you're not going to remember everything, right? And then sometimes your notes become notes for other people. Like it becomes a formal document for people to go back to for a specific important meeting. And sometimes from your notes, it turns into content for some of your important presentations. So good note taking, I believe it is a skill set. And it doesn't mean that your initial notes are going to be the final notes, but a lot of times I'm typing away furiously, and then after the meeting, I take about an hour to really just clean it up, put some structure behind it. So please, I know you guys do it all the time in school, but you'll be doing that much more in consulting, and it's very valuable.
I don't know if Miguel would like to also answer this question.
Yeah, of course. I was just gonna, mostly everybody has said everything that I've wanted to say. Day to day, definitely very focused on the analytical component. Working on Excel and also PowerPoint. And then also obviously attending a couple meetings either with the internal team or with your client. But I definitely just emphasize kind of working on those soft skills. Obviously, when you're working, at least at Mercer, we're typically staffed in projects that have 5 to 6 people. And how we have a unique model where we are typically staffed on 6 different projects at a time. You're going to be working with a lot of different people. So I would definitely vocalize and say, continue to work on your soft skills, try to be flexible with your collaboration methods, be open to new ways, new approaches. And yeah, so I would definitely say continue to focus on your soft skills, but definitely as an analyst out of college, I would definitely say a good majority of your time is spent on Excel and PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I'm going to ask for the last question, Andrew.
Hi guys, I just want to say thank you for doing this today, and it's really been super helpful. I know you mentioned a lot about PowerPoint and Excel skills, but with the job market being so tough right now, what is something that we could do to kind of stand out in interviews and kind of stress that we are capable in technology and try to sort of integrating AI into our daily lives?
I can start. So I think in terms of standing out in interviews, a lot of it, I would say, is soft skills, like Miguel mentioned, and really making sure that you are prepared so that you're not overly nervous and that you are personable and are able to kind of connect with your interviewer. I think that that's a huge piece that is not often talked about explicitly, but it's really important throughout the process to kind of build your network with your interviewer. And I would also say making sure that you don't just focus on the case interview, but you also really have your behavioral interview questions down pat. So I would like to think that everyone can focus on what they can control, right? So you should know your resume backwards and forwards. You should have examples for situational interview questions. You should really be prepared with what Andrew brings to the table, or what Brittany brings to the table, or Calvin, right? And make sure that you really have a reason for why you would be a good fit for the firm, why you're interested in those types of things. And then in terms of AI, I don't know that it's really a box you need to check, but if it's something that you're ultra passionate about, by all means, go for it. Take trainings. There are a lot of free trainings available online, and you can always kind of create an edge with that.
So, well, at least at Deloitte, I know now there are more profiles that we target, and it's becoming more specific over the years. It's so much that I can't even keep up now. Um, but usually we will communicate to you what kind of skill sets that we are looking for in the job description. So it's not going to be a surprise. So for example, if it's an analyst position, but it's like software engineering, for example, you know, it's going to be good for you to have those specific coding skills or tech skills that you have. But once again, coming out of college, I don't think people are looking for an AI genius in consulting. Like you have all the AI tools ready, but to Savannah's point, in consulting, which is really underrated during your interviews, is your behaviorals. I think most people, they just expect, most candidates to really just do pretty well for their cases. I know in my experience, there was like a class of 30 people applying for these positions at Deloitte, and we created a chat. And then afterwards, we were just, asking each other, hey, what did you say in this question, in this case? And everybody's answers were like fairly similar, right? And so if you want to differentiate yourself, it's in the behavioral part of the interview. And I would say, I think this applies to probably any consulting firm. Um, if you could articulate, let's say, leadership abilities, I think that goes a long way, right? Leadership abilities could be like at school, if you could talk about your experiences as a president of a club at school and what did you do, what were the outcomes, and also engaging the interviewers. And it's gonna be different. Some people might just ask you A, B, C, D, E, F, G questions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or they could be more personable. And we in consulting, I mean, we say things like, we do the airplane test. Like, yeah, this person has a great resume, but could you stay on a flight with this person throughout the whole flight? Or also the test of, are you comfortable to lead this analyst with the client by him or herself? So that goes a long way as far as, your people skills, how polished you are in your speech. Those things go a long way. But I would say if you want to seem like a star, try to show that you have leadership capabilities and potential.
Yeah, no, just want to kind of echo what Danny said as far as the personal skills. Just because I've done a lot of interviews with UIP, and like you mentioned, case studies, a lot of people have very similar answers, and they're not incredibly difficult or complex. So there's usually they're steering you in the right direction to get to that answer. So because of that, a lot of people will have generally around the same type of answers. And so they're really just kind of checking boxes. The behavioral is definitely where people start standing out. And with that, don't just rely on your resume to kind of guide you through your behavioral. Reason being is a lot of people, this is a competitive job. So a lot of people are going to have decently high GPAs. They're going to have some leadership experience. They're going to have some clubs. They're going to have, depending on what year, might already have some internships. So it's really hard to differentiate between on like, hey, whose internship was better, whose club is better than which club, right? It's just, hey, it's great that you're involved. That's awesome. It's great you have great GPA. But as Danny mentioned, like the airplane test of a lot of times, as I mentioned earlier, you are working late hours. It's who do you want to work late hours with? And is that someone, as you mentioned, that you want to leave alone with the client? Those are big questions to ask. And there's not much, as we mentioned, that you are really bringing to the projects as an undergrad hire. We're not expecting anyone here to be the AI experts or the Tableau experts that are just running the project. But if you're someone that we can still have sit at a table with the clients and someone that brings that type of energy, that enthusiasm, and that passion to learn new things, and seems like they will try hard, those things go a very long way, especially in the interview process.
Yeah, I would almost say that they go farther. And honestly, I mean, I was an international relations major at USC. I know I didn't say that in my intro, but I wasn't a business major. And when I interviewed for consulting firms, I had no idea what to expect. I had learned that consulting was even an industry maybe a few months before. And yeah, I see Truman said he's the same. So I know that it's a common experience for people who end up in consulting, but is often not something that's explicitly said to students, which I think is unfortunate and probably all on us as consultants to start bringing that up. But I would say I was surprised to find out how many liberal arts majors and majors who didn't have backgrounds in business. I know, Miguel, you said you were pre-med, so very similar. We don't filter out. I mean, at PwC, I can say we don't filter out by major or by background necessarily. And I know from experience, most other firms don't either. So I definitely wouldn't let that sway you or prevent you from shooting your shot.
Okay, unfortunately, we are running out of time, so I want to start wrapping the panel up. I want to thank our amazing panelists for sharing their industry insights with us. And I also want to thank our students for attending this event. I hope this gave everyone a better understanding of the consulting industry. Industry Insights is a series of panels, so we will also be having sessions for AI and data science, entertainment, as well as community engagement. You can find more details about these panels and our other Career Center events on Connect SC or at careers.usc.edu. Also, keep a lookout for more information about Trojan Talks, as several of our panelists will be hosting Trojan Talks throughout the semester. So if you want more of your questions answered, make sure to look out for those. And once again, I just want to thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.